Welcome to episode 46 of the XrmToolcast. In this episode, I talk with James Novak, a previous guest as well as a fellow MVP, on some updates to the XrmToolbox for developers. This is going to be a very dev-heavy episode, where we also talk about shared projects, sourcing Nuget packages, ILMerge, ILRepack, and pitfalls we ran into, and even updates to the XrmToolbox.com platform. Although this is dev heavy, I do start the episode off with an update on Jonas, so if you're interested in that, make sure you check that out. Now, let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the XrmToolcast with me, your host, Daryl, always raising the bar. Again, Jonas is out. Quick update on him. I have not had a chance to actually talk to him, but I do see that he is home now. So that's good. Great news. And able to do at least some minor lifting on any side of his body, which again I think is great news. And he's been doing a little bit of coding work, which I think is probably the best news for the selfish community that depends on all the work that he does. So yes, we'll see if his verbal skills are improving as well, and hopefully we'll be able to have him on in the near future. So that's a little update on that. But today, I have a repeat guest and fellow MVP, and James Novak. Is that how you pronounce it? Oh, that's not. No, I'm sorry.
Pretty close.
I figure if I'm gonna butcher everybody's names, I might as well butcher the names of everybody, including those that I know. But no,
batting 1,000. You're doing good.
I call him Jim. You're James everywhere. You're Jim most of. I don't know. You're Jim and James. I don't know. You figure it out. But Jim Novak, how are you doing?
Doing all right. Yeah, James makes me sound smarter than I am, so I go with that whenever I need to. But if you know me, Jim works fine. Yeah. Yeah, and thanks for the update on Jonas. It's good to hear he's doing well. He's been, sorely missed in the community. So I'm sure everybody's wishing him well.
Yep. So, Jim, last time we had you on was about 2 years ago. And I think we had you on to talk a little bit about some shared component work that you were doing in the XrmToolbox. But since then, I think you're the one that added the feature to it, or the main feature that I wanted to talk about today at least, and that was the ability to handle shared components, shared DLLs in the XrmToolbox. Did you do that, or am I just am I getting ahead of myself?
It's like being interrogated here.
Yes.
It's like the good cop, bad cop.
Did you submit the code?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. So why don't you go ahead and explain the problem, explain what your solution is, and why people care about it or should care about it.
Yeah, it's funny. It actually stemmed from the shared component work. So the toolbox uses, tell me if I'm right on this, the MEF component framework for loading up components.
I believe
and so. Whenever it loads up, I think that's what it's called. We'll verify that. Tanguy can make fun of us if we got it wrong, but it's a method for loading dependent components for your application. And whenever I was trying to deploy a shared assembly, let's say I have my shared components, share controls component, right? Mm-hmm. And I was trying to load it up, and if it's in the root folder with the XrmToolbox executable, it worked fine. But like the Fusion loader failed; it would just fail to find it. And I saw some really odd behavior with sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't, dependent on what I was exposing. So I just started digging around into how can I control where things are loaded on application load, and found this little code snippet, and that's really where it came from. Is if I want to deploy a shared assembly, in my case it was a custom control DLL, I want to make sure that it loads properly.
Awesome. So this is the case of maybe you reference something that you want a DLL that's a third-party library. Maybe you want to structure your code in DLLs rather than being all one megalith project, all that kind of fun stuff. This allows developers on the XrmToolbox to go through and be able to package those DLLs, those compiled components in, and be able to reference them and utilize them from their tools, correct?
Yep, exactly. And it's just a bit of a code snippet, so it's commented out by default. I think that's how you found it. And it's kind of guidelines for doing it.
Why is it commented out by default?
Well, I mean, if everything loads fine, you don't need it, right? So that's cool. But I didn't want to force it on everybody because it loads. It's on assembly load, it would run every time a reference is found. So just why have the added overhead if you don't need it?
Okay.
And you're basically injecting your code into the middle of this. Is kind of the pipeline for loading. You're telling it where to load assemblies. So I put a convention in there that I was following, using the name of my assembly and a child folder, and that makes you deploy things a little bit different too as part of your NuGet package. But you have the ability to override it. It's as much guidance as it is. Here's a convention that I use. It seems to work fine.
Awesome. Yes, I've got two things that may change now due to that simple ability. Number one is all my tools currently exist in a single solution. So if you go to GitHub, it's all under the dlibita XRM Tools solution. And the primary reason for that is I created them all with the actual shared projects ability in Visual Studio. So that way shared code would be compiled into a single one, just like I do for my plugins, which was great for that. But now that I have the ability not to have to do that, it probably makes more sense to actually make those separate DLLs and then be able to just reference them and utilize them as such. So I'll probably go through and do that. So I guess here's a question. Maybe we haven't spent any time doing that. If let's say I have two tools that are loading the same assembly with different versions, does it handle that separately? Do you know if the framework handles that?
That's what I'm not sure about. That's a good question. I don't know whether the framework, will create a is it app domain in .NET?
Yep.
So it'll give you a container app domains for all of your stuff and protect you from the rest of the world. I'm not really sure. So if you and I both have a tool, you're saying, and we have a shared assembly, one's version 1, and I'm using version 2, will they load up and see clashes? I'm not really sure. It's a good question. I haven't tested that. I think it depends on the loader and how your plugin is loaded in the app domain world. But it's been such a long time since I've had to worry about that. I haven't tested it.
Haven't had to worry about things.
I know. Well, it's one of those where I'm deploying, and we actually had this debate. I think whenever we first sat down and talked, I think it was the first time I met Tanguy in person. We were talking about that, and I think we were sitting in the meeting, I think at the summit, and debating this about where do we put these controls, because versioning is exactly. I know you might have been either you or Jonas brought it up. And for exactly this reason, because we were talking about putting out a shared set of controls for everybody and just deploying it with the toolbox, the base executable. And we started doing that. Actually, it's a work in progress. It's been too long. It's sitting there, but that's exactly the concern. If I'm working with an older version, it would make an update. What about breaking changes? But that's with any bit of shared code you put out. So we were debating about the versioning from day one, even before we started discussing this as an option.
Totally. Yeah, that's DLL never goes away, does it?
Yeah, but actually, so back to I want to ask you a question, even though you're the host.
Oh, that's okay.
Your shared project. Yeah, I mean that's actually one of the things you and I talked about this, how to publish a NuGet package of code, right?
Yeah.
And that might be a way around this if we're going to be deploying shared stuff. Mm-hmm. We're a community. We obviously want to share our stuff, and to avoid dependencies, you just compile the code all in one place. Maybe that's another option. Can you because you were the one that showed me how to do that. Can you talk a little bit about that if you haven't already? I mean, I don't know if it's come up on past podcasts or not.
No, yeah. So let's dive into that. So I mentioned shared projects, which is completely different than source-only NuGet packages. So a source-only NuGet package is a package that when you go to install it, when you make a reference to it and you install it via NuGet, it does not download a DLL and add a reference in your project to the DLL. It just adds a reference. It just actually takes your code and puts it under a folder inside of your project. Okay, so that means that if you have 6 projects that all need that code base, then it's going to be duplicated 6 times, which is
gotcha. Okay.
Good and bad. So maybe there's a reason that you might want to, have that version, then tweak one of those files for something great. You can do that. The next time you go to update your source-only NuGet package, the NuGet does a diff for you. And if there's any files that are different, that have changed, so if you went through and you updated a file, it knows that because it has the previous version. It can compare that. And it will leave the file there if you've touched it. If you haven't touched it, it just removes everything and puts a new folder with a different version number in its place. So in the happy world, it cleans everything up for you and you're good to go. In the not happy world, you might have to do some changes, and that's only if you're actually editing the source code itself, which you probably shouldn't be doing. It's really just a hack to get around the whole compiling and referencing DLL sort of thing. So.
Well, in this case, then what's your shared project?
So the shared projects are things that shared projects is what I use when I don't have to use Nuget to share stuff. So if I'm on an internal project, I'll have shared projects, and shared projects are just a Visual Studio tool that allows you to just define some code that's listed, that's on the disk once, but is included in the compile of anything that references it.
So instead of you referencing a project and it's going to pull over the assemblies and add that as a reference, it's just going to compile the code into an assembly.
Correct. And it's really kind of magical in that if you ever, let's say you have a dependency on a third-party DLL in your shared project in your code there. Let's say, what's the JavaScript serialization library? Help me out, Jen. What is that? Everyone uses Newtonsoft.
Newtonsoft.
Thank you for helping me out.
Thank you. I was going to say Nuget. I got Nuget stuck in my head now.
So let's say you have a reference to that, and you're utilizing that reference. You're using statement and using it in your code and your shared project, and you have that project referenced by two other projects. One of the projects has a reference to that, and the other one does not. Has a reference to the Newtonsoft library. In the one that has the Newtonsoft library reference, everything will be just fine. In the other one that doesn't, it will show up as an error. If both of them are missing the references, it'll show up as two errors because you actually have two errors, but it's the same file. So that's kind of weird. Like there's a drop down to say, oh yeah, do you want to look at it in this file, this project, or this project? So that kind of shows. That's really kind of cool how that works. But it's the same. It's only a single file on disk. Therefore, you only have to check in that once. Now, I have gone through and combined both of those features. The one weird thing is a shared project file does not allow any references in Visual Studio, nor does it allow any Nuget packages.
I was just going to ask, can you get past the code-only Nuget in a shared project and have it used by everybody?
So what I have done before is I've created a regular project file, and in the same folder I created a shared project file. Which takes a little bit of hacking normally because it doesn't, Visual Studio. So you already have a project name this thing. You say, shut up, whatever. But no, so you get around that little hack, which isn't hard at all. And then you have to so you go and add a reference to your regular project to the source-only Nuget package that brings everything down to disk, and then you have to manually go through and update and add to the shared project all the files from the Nuget only source only files. If that makes sense. So so basically you just have a manual step of adding any files that exist there, and then that's it. Then at that point in time, then you can manage your source only Nuget packages for that one solution, that one spot, and have multiple packages use it and exist on disk only once. So
gotcha. Yeah, well, I was just thinking, like, why are we talking about this in the first place, right? The downloading assemblies like we started with, and then the code-only Nuget, and then the shared projects. One of the things that we used to do in the old days is ILMerge, right? And that's just one of the reasons I looked into this as opposed to ILMerge.
Oh, yeah. In the old days, it was ILMerge. Now it's ILRepack. Come on. ILPack. That's the...
Right. Well, I mean, when was that? When was ILMerge stop? When did they stop support for it?
Well, they being Microsoft and plugins, or ILMerge assembly itself?
The assembly itself they stopped work on it. That's been a while. And then Microsoft put out the statement, sorry, we're not going to support this because it's weird, right? And that was pretty much
evil
the
magic
I got. And it still seems to work, right? But it's one of those things where, like, I think that's the reason. It's like, why don't I just ILMerge my stuff together and throw it over to XrmToolBox? Are there problems with that? Because it seems to be fun. I think that's what people do with a lot of their assemblies now is they just put them all together and deploy it.
I've never ever had an issue with ILMerging. The one thing that's a little bit difficult sometimes is to make sure that you sign it correctly. That's all. And I've
Right,
in
right.
my Visual Studio Solution Accelerator, I do that for you automatically. It's already set up in the command line. You just have to like enable it basically. You have to just comment out. Yeah.
Oh, right, right.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's all set up. But then I did mention ILRepack, and that's a open source version of ILMerge that has been updated much more often and is much more is actually, I find it to be a little bit faster and to create a little bit smaller assembly files. So, and they
Okay,
support
nice.
all the same exact commands as the ILMerge. So if you're using ILMerge today, you can go out and say, hey, rather than referencing ILMerge, I'm going to reference or what is it, ILRepack, and yeah, everything will run exactly the same, only hopefully a little bit better.
Well, what would your choice be on this? You mentioned you were going to go and refactor some of your stuff and use this method for loading that we now have in the
Yeah.
template, right? Why would you do that versus ILMerge then? Do you want to have one place for your assemblies to be loaded for all of your tools? Is that kind of the
So
goal?
if I was going to start today brand new and I had 4 different tools, there are some choices that I make in the way that I do things that I'd like to be able to share among all my tools, right? My icon, right? I'm lazy. I create a single icon, and that's the same one I use for all my tools. Jonas, on the other hand, is he creates a separate one for each. Now his aren't very complicated. They're just Swedish coloring and some letters. So but they are much.
Yeah, but he's got a whole graphic design
Yeah.
department. So
So they do it very nice, and I'm like Winamp or something. It was okay. It was okay back in the day. That just never changed, but people still use it. I don't, whatever.
totally recognizable,
Totally
right?
recognizable. Yes, I can't change now. So yeah, so that sort of thing. I don't want to have to go through and define that and store that in more than one place because I want to update it once and update it everywhere, right? So if I was going to do it today, I would go through and create a separate project that is my shared code repository that then I can set up as a Nuget package that I then could reference in my other tools. And if anyone else wanted to reference them, great. And then I would just add those references, add those Nuget reference to the ability to load those things. So that way I don't have to deal with any compile time issues on my side, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. That's that.
Well, then your deployment. So, I mean, you remember the stuff we started talking about, that was for if I need to deploy multiple assemblies, right? Again, in my case, it was okay, ILMerge is bad. Not necessarily true, of course, but ILMerge is bad because Microsoft doesn't support it, so I'm deploying assemblies. But you're talking that we still have plenty of options, and you're still talking about using, compiling everything together in a single assembly.
That's not what I just said.
I'm just trying to think through. I thought you had you were doing your shared project in building.
That's what I'm doing now. But I said if I was going to redo it, I'd make those shared assemblies Nuget packages and then just add the and then use this onload technique of loading DLLs and being good. That's assuming that we don't have any versioning issues in that domain.
And you would for your tools, would you have, like under XrmToolBox, you'd put together your own unique folder? Because the way I do it with mine is for every plugin, I have a subfolder based on the assembly name, which isn't the most efficient in the world. But I just did it because that was the first time I tried it. So you're going to put a shared folder out just for new tool developers. You can put a shared folder in the plugin subfolder, and then you would have your shared assembly used by all.
I don't think so. Ideally not. Ideally, I'd have a separate folder for each tool, because what if you update one and it has a different version conflict or something like that? I want to keep those separate.
Okay. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
It
would obviously take up extra room on users' disks and they'd be longer to download and stuff like that. But I guess if I have to ILMerge it anyway, it's not really any more data than what it'd be doing today.
Right.
Because I know.
It's and disk space is a premium now, right?
Yeah. So. Totally. So
No, that's cool. Yeah. That's what I was wondering. We were just talking about several different options, and if you're building a new tool, you got a couple you just ticked off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing that's really weird with reference assemblies is if you then try to write code that references something that's in that. I said shared assemblies. If you try to write code that references something that's in that shared assemblies, a shared project, like it's not the same thing. So the simple example is testing. So let's say I have a plugin base class, and I put it in a shared project. My plugin base class, great. And then in that plugin base class, let's say we define the plugin step numbers, 10, 20, 30, 40 for the plugin registration steps.
Yeah.
Which is fairly common. And then we want to write some test code that references that logic, right? So you go ahead and you create your test project. Test project references your plugin. You have another project that's for your testing that you then need to reference something to get those those numbers for the plugin steps, right? So then, and then this is getting probably too confusing for this, but let's see if I can power the way through it. We're going to get there, right? So now you've got four projects. You've got your shared project that contains those numbers in them. You've got your plugin assembly. You've got your test project for your plugin assembly. And then you've got just a shared test project. Everything works great, except now that your shared test project has to reference your plugin, because the plugin is what actually contains the shared project. Okay, it can't reference the shared project.
Okay.
Because it's a different. It's not the same thing. Like they're not the same exact value. Now integer values, those are fine. But if it's an actual object, like an entity class, that's probably better. Entity class. Let's say you put the entity class in the shared. In that plugin, and now you have that shared code. It references that plugin. But then what if you create another plugin? And now your shared test project, it can't reference, it can't reference the other one. So then it really, what you have to do then is create another shared project for your test project. That then anything that references anything that's in that shared one has to be in that one as well. So when it compiles to the actual plugin itself. It's really confusing. It's
I was going to say it's basic. Let's say the technical term for that is a mess.
It is a mess. It's solvable. You got to kind of step back a little bit. Like, okay, so anything I reference here that's in this shared project, I have to put in a separate shared project, because if I'm going to reference that from multiple DLLs, that's really all it is.
Yeah.
Now
you get to the point where it's not helpful. Yeah, and it's for what? A couple of values. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say that I have noticed once you start getting in the 10 to 15 plugin assemblies, the shared projects start to take a performance hit.
Just so many loads and
especially with the early bound entities, because you may have 4 megabytes worth of C# files that are now multiplied by 15 for 15 projects, rather than having one assembly where everything's already compiled and it's not having to recompile everything on the fly 15 times. So in the really large projects, what I end up doing is just hiding all my projects except for the plugin I'm actually working, unloading them all, and that tends to take away the performance hit.
That's a nice idea. Okay, cool.
Yep. Now we know. All right. Do you have any more questions for me? Because I feel like now you interview me.
No, it's one of those that I mentioned before we jumped on the call that I feel like I'm a little bit rusty here. So I hadn't thought about this for a while. Had great intentions when I put it out there. But as with everything, there's always alternatives to how to do things, right? And if you're doing one very simple, toolbox tool, because they're not plugins anymore, it's a tool, then hey, this might be very helpful for you if you've got a user interface component, or if you've got a shared control, or some other thing you want to reference might be very handy for you. But when you start getting into multiples like you're talking about, you've got a couple different options. And that's our lesson in C#. What version are we on for the day?
What is it? They came out with like 8, didn't they?
Is it 9?
9? I think they came with 9.
It's 8 or 9, yeah.
I don't know. I only believe 4.7, whatever Microsoft Dynamics supports, is the highest one at this point in time. So I don't.
Yeah.
I pretend the other ones.
Well, that's the dot. Oh, that's what confuses me. That's the .NET runtime. I think the language version is up to like 9, and I can never keep track.
All right, and so that's why you get to use new features that aren't available in Visual Studio and compile to the other frameworks, because it's just magic. What's the word?
What is it?
Syntactic
sugar.
Syntactic sugar. There we go. Yeah. So it goes, oh, I know what you want, and compiles it to the same exact framework code. So.
Well, and that's the kind of stuff that, as back to the toolbox stuff, you got to make sure that you're supported using the supported version, because if you do something cool that we're not up to date on in the toolbox based deployment, you could run into some issues.
Yep. Oh, the fun that we live.
Tips and tricks. Yeah, tips and tricks.
These are more like pitfalls we've ran into.
Don't run into this one and get angry and frustrated like we did.
I've always kind of laughed at people. These are mostly teenagers that they don't care to spend any time to learn from anybody else's mistakes. You know, that's something that I've always been. I consider myself fairly good at, is to go, oh, what mistakes have you guys made? Great, I won't do that. And again, this is usually teenagers. They'll make the comment. I want to make my own mistakes, you know, and
yeah.
And to
really?
that,
you know, there's
yeah. Look, really, is that really what you want to do?
What kind of mistakes? Yeah, let's talk about the mistakes first. Yeah.
I don't need to get syphilis to know I don't want it. You know what I mean? Like that's the response.
No, I'm with you. I'm the youngest of four, and
okay.
I have a brother who was, you know, about a year and a half older than I was, so we were fairly close, and then two other siblings who were a few years ahead. So I had a lot of like, wow, man, he got his butt kicked for that one. Don't do that. Okay, good. And you know, that's I still made my own stupid mistakes. You know, I was always the kid.
There's plenty of room to make all your own mistakes. Even from learning.
Yeah, like all that, you know, don't touch the hot burner when you're real little. Of course, you know, no, I'm going to touch it anyway. But I'm with you. When I got older, I'm like, man, you got in trouble for that. Don't do that. So, But yeah, with development, you're totally right. It's one of those where it's a good learning experience, but you know, you pick your battles, right?
Yep, you do. You know, I don't even think we even mentioned where this source code for loading your assemblies is actually located in, right? So. Why don't you go ahead and share how a tool developer would find this magic little snippet?
I thought that was part of the learning. Is you get to find it. It's
everything
like a treasure.
Yeah. No, that's a part of the toolcast is that we actually help people that are doing the tools to come up with. Come on, Jim. Come on. What am I paying for you? What am I paying you for?
Well, this is it's actually in the template, not in. So this is something I know is I think why we're talking about it too. You asked the question, why isn't it in the base class? And that would be a good move. It's in the template for the My Plugin, which derives from plugin base. So you create a new project. My Plugin is the first class that's created. You scroll down a little bit, and you'll see some notes in the constructor, and it tells you a little bit about, hey, uncomment this line, and it'll give you the assembly resolve events.
And I think you're going a little bit too fast there, though, right? Because it's really you have to make sure you download the template project from the XrmToolBox.com, right?
Exactly. Yes, yeah. I skipped right over that.
Visual Studio project template that you download, and when you create one of those, then everything that Jim said just comes true magically, which is great.
Yes, it's not every class in the world. That would be magic. If every C# class came with this, that would be pretty impressive. But yeah, it's exactly right. It's been in the template for a few versions, so you might already have it if you've downloaded the latest over the last. Because it's been about a year, so it's been in the last couple of releases. But exactly, new project, my plugin. If you don't override the name and scroll down, you should see some notes on it. And if we put it in the base class, I guess the question I would have, and this is what I was kind of wondering, is would it fire every time? Would they have the ability to override it? Because you mentioned something about that.
Well, I think the logic can go in the base class, but then you can call it directly. You can not have it run. I mean, you can choose to have a single line to comment and call the code or not call the code, right?
Okay, I got you. So in the constructor, leave the comment in there, but move the method that we put in there into the base class.
Yeah, make it overrideable if there's some reason they want to change it. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Solutioning on the fly.
Yeah, and again, if you look at the code, I try to comment it, so feel free to add some feedback in there. It's part of the template is out there for everybody to review. And again, the convention I used was to expect a subfolder in the plugins folder with my assembly name, and that's where I look by default. But that's something you can override too.
Yep. That's that default was I think the same that I do as well. So so that's a big change, I guess, that people can use and utilize, because I know for me it's just the compile time that sucks when I'm trying to test something. If it's an ILMerge plugin, I'd be done by now, and I have to wait for this thing to ILMerge.
Wait, not ILMerge.
ILRepack plugin. No, ILMerge is a verb, just like Googling's a verb, so you can Google the Bing. So ILRepack
right.
with ILRepack with
it will be
with ILRepack.
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah. So yeah,
just to make it more confusing.
Just to make it as confusing.
Well,
as
and again,
can.
The thing you have to remember too on this, and this is what I mucked with a little bit, is so then whenever you package up your solution, your build then has to put things in the appropriate place. So generate that file, put the referenced assembly in the appropriate place into a subfolder so that it's part of your NuGet package. That's the only other caveat to this is whenever you deploy this and you publish it to the world, just make sure that's included too.
Yeah.
Because I think that was one thing I had to republish a plugin because I forgot to do that.
And I think I was one of the first tool users to have my own subfolder in my plugin deployed, because the early bound generators had one pretty much since day one to have a subfolder in there. So, but yeah.
So now you're just bragging.
Yeah, now I'm just bragging. Woo! I need Jonas here.
Well, you did the base class too, yeah.
Woo! Yeah. Yep. That wasn't that hard. I don't know. It was...
New folder.
New folder. Stop bringing me down.
It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much.
No, it doesn't.
No, that is the kind of stuff that, it's we're goofing off about it, but that is something that, when you're creating a tool, a lot of times those are the little things that, well, yeah, you can do that. That's not a big deal, and it's supported, and by the framework, it's not some restricted thing. So it's just something that, sounds goofy. We're joking about it, but it is something. If you're building a new tool, hey, you can do that.
And I think another thing that tool creators need to make sure they are doing, if they need to, is to utilize the settings framework that we have in the toolbox.
Yes.
For being able to save your settings and being able to save them connection specific.
Yes.
Because sometimes it makes a whole lot of sense for certain tools, other tools maybe not, to have settings that are specific to that particular org or a particular connection that you're actually connecting with. So that's another thing, if you're a tool builder out there that you didn't know about. Yeah, go check that out. So
no, absolutely. It's too easy not to use it.
And then there's knowing all the plugin, all the interfaces. There's all these extra interfaces within the XrmToolBox you could implement to. Number one probably is to give support. So there's that iPayPal interface to be able to have a support link show up, and then the number two one is for the issues and stuff, to be able to have it point to your GitHub repository to go through and do that. Back in the day, we first created, I think, an iCodeplex interface.
Oh, really?
That was the number one tool hosting back in the day. So yeah.
Holy cow! I haven't heard about that in ages.
I don't know if that's still there, but yeah. But there is the
or IMSDN for documentation. Is that? I haven't seen that one in ages. Yeah, get back to the one about money. What was that one again? No, it is. Joking aside, it is one where I don't know if I put it on all of mine. I think I might have it on one, but we've talked about this before. Nick Dolman put out a really nice post about supporting your community, because, as you know, I've only got a handful of tools and I try to support the toolbox and all that, but a lot of work goes into this. So if you want to say thank you, a couple of bucks here and there is kind of nice, especially whenever you have websites hosting and putting out your documentation for the plugins, and so if you want to show your appreciation, that's definitely one to keep an eye out for all your plugins.
Yeah, and I don't think. I think that Microsoft will be stepping up here. I don't know, though, but I do know that one of the major concerns that we have in our little community is our MVP instances are kind of going away, which normally isn't a big deal, except that's how the XRM Toolbox is hosted. The XrmToolBox.com and all that stuff is all hosted via a backend is Dynamics site, so portal, right? And so Tanguy was saying, hey, if that goes away, I have to move it to something else because I don't want to pay for that stuff. So I think though we managed to talk to the right people to say, oh yeah, let's help out Tanguy here and just
excellent,
cover that. But I don't know if that doesn't come out, if that's not the case, then we'll I think we'd rather hold a little fundraising effort for covering those costs for Tanguy, so he doesn't have to spend time moving it to another platform.
Right.
Yeah,
It's not just the website. You're right. It's a Power Apps portal. So of course, eating your own dog food with a platform. But what's the approval process? There's a
yeah,
workflow. You submit it. It pulls things from Nuget,
yeah,
keeps things, in sync and all that fun
yeah,
stuff. It's pretty. It's more than just a little bit of documentation. There's a lot going on there. So I
yeah.
totally agree. That would be a pretty significant move if he had to move it.
And then also he's actually made enhancements to it lately too. So now you can, as a tool developer, you can respond to comments for ratings and stuff.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, because I think I
and
had one person.
categorize too.
Yeah, and we had categorizing of tools too. That was a recent one too. So that way you can kind of, who are our user setting ones and all that kind of fun stuff. So that's a big help too. But yeah, I was thinking, I think one of my tools got like a 1-star rating, and there was no comments to it at all. And I'm like, what was wrong? I'm like, what can I do? Like, I mean, it was kind of.
It was the icon. It was totally the icon.
Yeah, probably. Maybe that was it. Maybe if I had 2 people that said 1 star, icon, I'd actually go and change it. So, or maybe I should have a contest to say, all right, come on and create a new icon, and you get to have your name on it or something or other. I don't know. It'd be cool.
See, now there you go. Thinking outside the box. That's
yes. How to make other people do my work for me.
Yeah. We'll give you exposure.
We'll give you exposure. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I didn't realize the comment thing. That's kind of nice because that is something that, again, as a developer, if you want to do it, you put a lot of work into it. It's nice to get feedback, and if you get that commentary, it's nice to know what the pain points are and make some adjustments and honestly just make it better too.
Yeah.
It's always nice to get some feedback to improve on things.
So to go back to where we were 2 years ago, you've been maintaining and making improvements to your shared set of controls for WinForms, I guess, because they're not just for the XrmToolBox. You can use them for any WinForm development you want to be doing in 2021, right? Are those still being maintained? Have you made any updates to that? Anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, actually, Jonas has been pretty actively working on it, and we've got a few other people in the community. Mark Carrington has been making some updates to it, so it's kind of cool. I started out with some pretty simple ones, like I had an entity list grid, and got some feedback actually from you and Jonas and Tengi and several other people, like, hey, it'd be cool if we could do this. So I did a major refactor. It's been a while, and then Jonas and I merged. So I took he's got the grid, the data grid. We took and pulled his color-coded XML viewer in, and a few other components, and we added some stuff to his grid view. So there's some updates there that. The first update was actually what you said. It was removing the dependency on XrmToolBox. It's basically, if you want to pass a connection in, you can use this on any WinForm that might be connecting to. If you've got an internal migration tool, for example, you can use these tools for managing your application. So Jonas has been doing a lot more work than I have. He's got a whole process for deploying stuff, so that's kind of cool. Following real DevOps practices, which he's way better at than I am. Yeah, I know. It's cool.
You mean just like copy from the debug bin folder and like paste somewhere and then call it a day?
Yeah. No, he's got a whole DevOps thing set up. It's really nice. It posted to GitHub the whole 9 yards. Or sorry, Nuget. Posted to Nuget the whole 9 yards. It's pretty cool. So a lot of stuff has been made there. So again, that's another one where I've been the one slacking. So Jonas has been doing a lot of work, and I said most recently Mark Carrington did some cool stuff, and he's obviously one of the gurus behind the SQL tool, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I forget the name of it. What is it? SQL
for CDS or something?
SQL CDS? Yeah, CDS. SQL for CDS. Yeah, it's if you haven't checked it out, it's absolutely amazing. Yeah. So he's been adding a lot to this too. So it's kind of nice to get some feedback and input. A few others I've been working on, just been sidetracked. Like I said, I'm the slacker here. But if you have any suggestions, comments, questions, whatever, feel free to throw some in there. So we're trying to come up with, like I said earlier, what's the best way to put together shared components, and that's what Jonas and I have been going back and forth on with. He had his approach to it, my approach to it. So the major refactor was, again, first to remove the dependency directly on XrmToolBox, and then is to make it like, can we derive from just generic controls? So what he did is he derived from DataGrid, for example, and he just extended it to add dynamics capabilities to it, whereas I was wrapping things up in containers. So it's been kind of an interesting project just to think about how you want to design and put things out for other people to consume. So that's been kind of the fun exercise, the learning part of it, as opposed to you put things out for other people to use. You really have to think about it differently. It makes you, sit back and redesign things a little bit more flexible and take into consideration other people's use. It's kind of a cool project from that perspective.
That is. All right. I'm going to put the tool as the SQL tool for Mark because I've used it quite a bit. No offense to the Fetch XML builder, but I just SQL for CDS. Yeah, I was right. It was SQL for CDS.
Yeah. Okay. I thought CDS was in there. I can't believe he hasn't changed the name yet.
Yeah.
That's an amazing one. Yeah. Yes. That one I can't even begin to know how he implemented that, but yeah, he's been contributing, so that's pretty cool. It's kind of nice to, honestly, you know what it's like when you put something out there and it's one thing for people to use it, but there's another thing to come in. It's like, hey, it'd be really cool if. I'm like, oh, you're thinking about this. You're not just using it. So
the other one that I actually
kind of neat getting that feedback.
The other one I actually submitted a pull request to last week, maybe a week before, was CodeNow. The quick little code snippet tool for the XrmToolBox.
I hadn't seen that one.
Oh, you haven't used that one? Yeah, it's been around since.
No.
It was last released 2017. So.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. Alex. Let's see, what's his last name? Schlega is the author of that. But.
Okay.
It was really nice for any time where you had to do like a weird configuration change, update change, or something like that, where you need to tweak something in a really weird manner that you can't really do easily, like in Excel, or it's just standard bulk update sort of stuff. It makes it real nice just to be able to go through and run that script, and especially if maybe you don't have access to prod or stuff like that too. You could say, you've got access to prod. You go ahead. Here's the snippet. Just go ahead and run it. And yeah, so I've been using that, and I wanted it to be more LinkPad-like, right?
Okay.
And so you've used LinkPad, correct or not? For like a scratch pad?
Yeah, it's been a little while, but yeah.
So it has this awesome dump extension, right? It just like anything you give it, you just dump it, and it puts in this pretty HTML looking thing. So if it's a list, it gives you a table. If it's this, it gives you that, and it just does it really nicely. So I added, or by default, the way to kind of spit out to the debug command, the window in the tool is to do like a console write, and it requires it to be a string, which is kind of annoying because you might give it an integer and just call it a string on it, right? Do it for me. I'm lazy, right? So that's one thing I changed. And then I went through and I added the same code logic that I use in my plugin logic logging. So that way it will go through, and if it's an entity, it will go through and list all the properties in JSON basically of what the entity is, and if it's an entity list, it'll go through and give you a whole like an array, but then there's different entities in it. So it goes through and does all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah,
nice.
It's super nice. I've got it running locally on my machine, and it feels so much nicer than ever trying to go through and do that manually. But yeah, I'm still waiting for Alex to approve that pull request and see if he remembers how to redeploy that, because he hasn't done it in 3 years. So
it's on Codeplex.
Yeah, it almost was, I think. Yeah, so yeah.
I'll have to check that out. I hadn't heard about that one.
Yeah, that's a little quick little code snippet thing. So, yep.
Nice.
So you mentioned if anyone wants to have any input or have any questions, they should let you know, but you didn't mention how to let you know. So as we wrap up here, how do our listeners get a hold of you, Jim?
Well, just contacting me directly. I'm at Twitter on CrmDevJim, one word, of course. But what I actually was talking about is go out to the GitHub repo, and my handle on GitHub is James Novak, and that is where we have our repo for the controls, and I am looking it up as we speak. I think it's XrmTB, XrmToolBox Controls, so definitely go check that out. Feel free to put a pull request in, and we'll definitely get back to you on that, and happy to have the contributions.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn, James Novak, you can find me there, standard stuff. And my website is Futures Consulting.
Okay, so LinkedIn was James, GitHub was James, Twitter was Jim. Was James taken in Twitter?
I don't know. Honestly, you know what? No, I had James Novak in Twitter, and I got rid of it because I never used it. So I put the CRM Dev one as my professional. I don't post too much to it. I think I just post from LinkedIn. But yeah, I didn't realize that. But say it's a thing. I'm more relaxed on the Twitterverse.
Uh-huh.
On LinkedIn, I'm professional and I'm very smart on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yes, that was one of my naming rules when I named my kids. They couldn't have a name that could be other names. You know, like there wasn't a Tim and a Timothy. There wasn't a Dan and a Daniel. There wasn't, Richard is probably the worst one. Like Rich, and then Richard. Yeah. And how do you get Dick out of that? I don't know, but whatever. Never understood that one, but maybe I should Google it.
No, that's still one of life's mysteries. Yeah, I don't think anybody has an answer for that. I think that's just like, nope, it's the way it is.
Susan and a Sue. Yep. So all my kids pretty much are they're all one syllable because there's no reason to shorten it if it's one syllable.
Just Mo.
Mo. Yes. It can't even be Bill because Bill's William. I mean, come on. I mean, yeah, none of those things. Yeah, that was the one caveat I said to my wife. Nope, we're going to name, and I'm not going to have names that you have to potentially lengthen or shorten. So
I don't want to be confused here.
I don't want to spend I don't want them spending the rest of their life telling people what they want to be called. It's just evident. It's their name.
Yeah. Well, that was like my uncle was named after his father, and my grandfather, his name was Patrick, Thomas, and he refused to go by Thomas. He wanted to be his own man, so he went by his middle name for his entire life. And I remember finding that out when I got older. I was still a kid. I'm like, what? I don't understand. Why? What do you mean his name is Thomas? I don't get it. So it was traumatic, very, very traumatic. Yeah. You saved your kids a lot of trouble.
That's my father-in-law. He goes by his middle name and not his legal name. And I was going through doing background check reports for a government job I was working, trying to get clearance for, and I was like, all right, so I've got to go through and list his name, what he's known as, but then I also got to go through and list his legal name, and so it was kind of
huge red flag.
Yeah, and huge actually, I had multiple names for myself too, because in the state of Indiana, I went through and got the Real ID license last time I got it, and so that's the ID required in order for you to fly, and so I had to bring in my birth certificate, and my birth certificate. They didn't really have a good way of having capitals in the middle of the name, so they put spaces in it to show that it was a capital. And so they saw that and said, no, your last name has a space in it. I was like, no, it doesn't. Like, yes, it does. I was like, I should know. It's my name. It's on the birth certificate. It doesn't. I'm like, okay, whatever. So now officially, I don't have the same last name as the rest of my family, my wife and my kids. They all don't have the space in it. And I do legally have the space between the A and the B in my last name. So now I've got to go fight another.
That's the man. That's the man keeping you down. That's what it is.
It is. Yeah. Jim, I've enjoyed having you on. Thank you so much. So sorry that our guest may not know, but I think this is the fifth attempt, most of which I completely failed on. And the worst was the one where I said, hey, see you this afternoon or see you tomorrow. And then I never showed up for it because I didn't have the notification bell go off. So thank you for making this happening.
Yeah, you had to go dispute your name at the DMV, so it's fine. I get it.
Yes.
No worries at all. I was glad to jump on. It's been a while since we talked, so I was really enjoyed coming on, talking shop, and I think I learned a few things today myself, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. I'm gonna go refactor all of my plugins.
Yep. And if you don't like anything, if you really like it, if you don't like anything Jim said, you can send him a message. If you like it, you can respond to us at the XRM Toolcast here at cast@XrmToolBox.com. So that's all I got. Jim, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. This has been the XRM Toolcast with Jonas Rapp and Daryl Labar. If you have any questions for Jonas or I, or suggestions for future episodes, please send them to cast@XrmToolBox.com or tweet to XrmToolcast.